Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary and today's video is going to be my quarterly wrap up for the first quarter of the year. I'm going to go through some stats that I think are interesting just at the beginning, and then I will go through my top 5 and bottom 5 of the year so far. So first up, I have read 73 books in just January through March, and that's the first quarter. So I'm not talking about anything that I read in April in this video, but I did DNF 11 books in the first quarter of the year. I have read 3 rereads. And I'm mentioning that because I do count the rereads in my stats, but I don't count them for the readings because I'm not re-rating books when I reread them typically. I hope that makes sense. And then my total page count for the year is 26,138 so far. So that's an average of about 358 pages per book, which seems pretty accurate to me. I have read books ranging from publication years 1887 all the way through 2025. I've already read 4 2025 releases this year, which I think is pretty good. Given last year, I don't think I read a single 2024 release until like November. So doing good on that front. I've read a smattering of books published in the 1900s and then several books published from 2014 to all the way through 2025. The majority of the books that I'm reading were published in 2018, which I think is interesting, with 12 books published in 2018. 13 books published in 2024, so that is actually the most that I've read are from last year, which does make sense because I do tend to put books on hold that are new releases. I've started doing that, so when they come in, I'm reading them. So 13 2024 releases, 12 2018 releases, 10 2023 releases, 9 2022 releases, 6 2020 releases, 5 2021 releases, and 4 2019 releases. The rest are pretty much one from each year. I just thought that was interesting. I have read the majority romance this year, which I think is really interesting, followed by fantasy, which kind of surprises me because I feel like I've not been reading as much fantasy as I normally read, but I've read, oh, that's a lie, sorry. I read the most mystery thrillers and romance. So 12 mystery thrillers, 12 romance, 10 fantasy books, which again, kind of surprised me. And then I have 8 historical fiction books, which again surprises me because I feel like I don't tend to gravitate towards historical fiction, but I have read quite a few this year. And then general fiction / literary fiction, I've read 5. Contemporary, I've read 5. I've read 6 nonfiction and 6 sci-fi. And I will say I haven't read any like hard sci-fi. When I'm saying sci-fi, most of that is time travel books or dystopian books. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's usually books that have a science fiction element that I'm just putting in sci-fi because that's where they fit the most, but not necessarily like space operas. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then I have read 3 classics and 5 horror books, but then I have read also 1 short story collection. Again, I think if I combine contemporary and like general fiction / literary fiction, I don't combine them because to me they're different. Like I've described this before, contemporary for me is a book that you can like very clearly state the plot of the book. I don't know if that makes sense. Whereas literary fiction and general fiction tend to be more like either slice of life stories or very character focused books that don't necessarily have like a firm plot to me. Again, I hope that makes sense. I don't know if it does, but there you have it. I read 2 translated books so far this year. I've read books set all over the world. I do keep track of this because I do think it's interesting, but I don't think I'm going to go through all of it. But I've read quite a few books set in other countries, which I always think is interesting. So we've got 2 in Brazil, 11 in England, 4 in Ireland, 2 in Mexico, 3 in Russia, and then a lot in the US. The most popular locations in the US tend to be New York City and Los Angeles, I've noticed. So I have read 3 books set in Los Angeles and 8 books set in New York City, which again is just quite a lot. And then if you count the rest of New York State, or specifically Harlem, because 1 book was specifically set in Harlem, I've read 11 books set in New York. And for California, I've read 8 books, sorry, 8 books set in California in general, which again is just quite a lot. So I thought that was interesting and noteworthy. Other than that, again, it's mostly like 1 book set in Vermont, 1 book set in Tennessee, 1 book set here. So not a whole lot of note outside of that, but I just think it's interesting to look at where the majority of my books are set. And then I have read 26 books of the 73 that I would consider to have queer rep. That's not necessarily the focus of those books, but I just think it's interesting how much more common it is for books to have queer rep now than I feel like they ever have before. And it's just something that I like to keep track of. My author stats. So I do typically read more female authors than male authors. This year, I'm doing the same thing. I've read 55 female authors, 17 male authors. Author race, I am trying to read less white authors, but the most common author stat, like just general breakdown for me, is an American white female author. That's the majority of the books that I read, that's who I'm reading from. So I'm keeping track of that because I want to like keep an eye on extending the amount of like stories that I'm hearing, I guess. But I have read 51 books by white authors, 5 books by Black authors, 3 books by Indigenous authors, and then 13 books by other people of color. The majority, again, of the authors that I read are coming from the United States. So I've read 52 books from the US, or from authors from the US, by authors from the US, 10 books by authors from the UK. I have read 3 Irish authors so far this year, which I did all in that vlog that I did about reading Irish books. 2 authors from Mexico, 3 authors from Canada, and then a smattering of like Australia, France, Bangladesh, all 1. So there's that. I do primarily read audiobooks. I've read 60 audiobooks this year. That's how I get the majority of my reading done. People always ask how I read so much. It's because I listen to audiobooks almost constantly. So 60 audiobooks, 3 physical books, which is way lower than I even thought it was. I don't know why I thought I'd read like at least double that, but apparently not. I have read more physical books in the second half of, or in April, I guess. I've read, I think, 2 additional books physically, but also I have mixed media on here. So some books I start physically and then listen to the audiobook for part of them. I've read 2 mixed media books, which that's probably what that was. And then I have read 7 ebooks, which is fine. I'm content with that. That means I've read 10 books or 12 books, a little bit with my eyes, at least, if not completely with my eyes. And that's something that I'm trying to do better about, because I do like just sitting down with a book. It's just, I feel like I have so much to do that I can't. And I would like to rectify that. The majority of my reading is adult. So I've read 57 adult books and 13 young adult books. I haven't read any middle grade this year. I put new adult as a category because I think technically one of the books that I read, Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, I think that would technically fall in new adult, but I had it listed as adult, so I'm keeping it. Sorry if that offends you. I don't really track new adult because I don't really, like, new adult is just younger adult characters that are typically like college aged. And typically it's like the difference between that and YA is like explicit sex scenes from what I've noted. And so I just put that in adult, but your mileage may vary. Ratings wise, the majority of the books I've given 3-star ratings, which is not great, but also like that's not uncommon for me. 3 stars is my top with 20. 5 stars is my second most with 15. So that's pretty good. And then I have 12 4 stars, and then the rest are just like in here. I do give quite a few 3.5 stars, and those I round up to 4 on Goodreads. And then I also give quite a few 4.5 stars, which I typically round down to 4 on Goodreads. Although I think I have one that I rounded up to 5. But my average rating is 3.6 at this point in the year, which I think is lower than it typically is. So that's just something to think. I think I'm normally around a 3.7, 3.8. This year we're at 3.6. So now I'm going to talk about the worst books that I've read this year. And these I kind of went through and did it by the rating that I've given them. So all of these got 2 stars with the exception of one that got a 1.5 star. So it actually is like my worst book of the year. And it was a huge disappointment for me, but I will talk about that last. So I'm going to go through these from not as bad to the worst. And then I'm going to go through my top 5 as well, from like the least top 5e to the number 1 book of the year for me so far. At the bottom of the bottom 5. So the 5th worst book that I've read this year so far is Bet on It by Jodie Slaughter. And I read this for the X's and O's readathon. I think I vlogged my experience, but don't quote me on that. So I will link the blog if I did. This is a romance book. It's a contemporary romance book set in South Carolina. It's about this female character who moves there because she's like having a lot of anxiety in the city, and she gets a remote job so she can live wherever, and she decides on the small town. The male main character is from there, and he moved away, but he's back because I think it's his grandmother she broke her arm or something, so he has to help her get around. And they meet at the bingo hall and sort of start, originally it's like a game type thing. If one of them wins, then they can have sex with each other or something. It was fine. Like, it was, for the most part, very unremarkable. The only thing that I didn't like, and this seems to be the thing that a lot of people do like, I don't like anxiety rep in books. I don't know why. It like never feels accurate to the way that I experience anxiety. And also, like, the anxiety in this book didn't totally make sense to me, because there are things like they're going to go to dinner with the main character's friends, right? And she's getting so anxious that she like has to sit in the car and like can't go into the dinner. But she and this guy have like semi-public sex semi-regularly. And I don't understand how that would not be anxiety inducing for you if getting dinner with someone is anxiety inducing. And I know that anxiety is like not a monolith. Lots of people have lots of different experiences. I just found that odd, and I could not reconcile it in my brain. I gave this book 2 stars. The next worst book that I read, I think I talk about this one in the vlog where I went to St. Martin. So I will link that for you. It's at the very end of the vlog, because I think I technically read this when I got back, but I finished that vlog when I got back, so I just put it in there. It's The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentile. This book, I struggle with this one because parts of it, I really thought like the premise was very interesting just execution-wise, it did nothing for me. So this is a mystery thriller set in a library, and it's kind of meta because like the main like level of the story is what I would call the like middle level, where it's a woman in a library with a group of people, and she is writing a novel about a murder, okay? And her novel is kind of based on the other people in the library. Like they're all characters, but they're all like I think it's the New York City Public Library reading room is where they are, or the Boston reading room. So I think it's Boston actually. So sorry about that. But they're all working on their books and like discussing their books. And there's a murder mystery in her book, but there's also this murder that happened in the library, or there was a scream in the library that she has turned into a murder in her mind. And then at the higher level, this is actually a book being written by the main character, and there's another mystery going on in the real world. And that was the part that I really didn't care for. Like, I thought it was a really interesting, like, meta idea about, like, an author writing a book about an author writing a book. Like, very book within a book type vibe. But I just couldn't connect to the book, or the book within the book. And overall, it just didn't work for me. But the third most disappointing book that I've read this year is A Botanist's Guide to Parties and Poisons by Kate Kavari. And this book really has cemented to me that I don't think cozy mysteries and cozy books that say cozy on them, I don't think are for me, because it just like the lack of intensity or the lack of like, I don't know, stakes kind of takes me out of it and like sort of makes me not care. I will say though, this would have been a 3-star book had the historical fiction elements been done better. This book I think is supposed to be set in the 20s, and I forgot that it wasn't a modern book until that would get brought up again. The premise is it's this woman who is the only woman working at this university in London, and she works in the botany department. Her mentor is accused of poisoning someone at a party, and she's trying to prove that it wasn't him. And it was like, that part was fine. It just like, there's also a romantic subplot that I kind of enjoyed with another guy who I think is studying like fungi or something. And I don't know, it just overall, the setting didn't really work for me. Like the historical setting, it took me out of it every time it was brought up because I was like, this doesn't make sense for that. So your mileage may vary. If you like cozy things, you might like it more than I did, but the cozy combined with the historical elements that I felt like were just randomly splattered throughout, for me didn't work. The number 2 worst book that I read this year is I Might Be in Trouble by Daniel Aleman. This one is a like kind of funny, kind of not like suspense book. So I put it in mystery thriller when I was like picking what genre it was, but I don't think that's really accurate to what it is. But it's about this guy who's a writer, and he is trying to write his next great book, and then he has a one-night stand with this guy, and the guy, when he wakes up, is dead. And so he's trying to get rid of this dead body so that his name isn't attached to it. And also, he decides that that's going to be the plot of his next book. So again, it has a very like meta, a writer being a character, but also writing about a writer, and like, it's a very like meta book within a book within a book thing. And especially when you like go out further to realize that there's like an author who's writing this book about an author writing a book, it just gets a little convoluted for me. But ultimately, I just did not care for this book. My favorite part of it was actually the interactions between the writer and his agent, because they have a very close, like very funny, she was definitely like the comedic relief of the story. But yeah, this one ultimately was not for me. I will not read anything else by this author because I just did not care about it. The worst book that I've read so far this year that I finished, because obviously the books that I DNF'd, I just didn't care for it. Also, I didn't read them. But the worst book that I finished this year, I gave 1.5 stars, and I was so disappointed by it because it got such rave reviews. And I think it has an adaptation coming out. Like, it was very well loved, okay? But it's All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. This, I think, won the mystery thriller category, or was nominated and was like close. I don't remember. Don't quote me on that. For Goodreads this year. This book, how do I even describe it? So the author is British, but he's writing about like rural Missouri. I don't know if you know this. I live in Missouri, not rural Missouri, but he's set this book in the Ozarks. I went to college in the Ozarks. So it's like a whole thing where like I'm very familiar with the setting, the type of people, the language used, the accents, all of that stuff. And none of it was accurate, which was interesting. There were just like, he used very British language, which is not used in rural Missouri. So that was strike one for me. Like, it very much like just took me out of the story. And also I felt like the plot was contrived and like didn't ultimately make sense. So the premise is, without spoiling anything, because I feel like you go like 80% of the book without really knowing what's happening, and then the last 20% is when things are explained. And then I even had to look up what happened because I was like, I don't understand this connection. Like, I don't remember who this person was, but there was like supposed to be a connection with it. So that was also a downfall for me for this book. But the premise is it's this guy who, when he's a teenager, he gets held captive by somebody for like a year, and there's a girl being held captive with him. And then when he gets released, it's like this crime that's been happening in his town where people, like children, are disappearing or something, and he ends up getting released, but the other girl he was with does not get released. And so he spends like the rest of his life trying to find her and figure out what happened to her. And it was like interesting enough, and like I hope they can adapt it and make it like, I feel like it could be a really good mini series, but for me, I just didn't care about reading it. It was too long. I already mentioned the issues with like the British language used and like just being very out of touch and out of like sync with what was going on, what was supposed to be happening. And I just didn't like it. Like, it just didn't, nothing about it rang true. And often, like, I'm not always looking for a book, right, that's gonna feel like real life, but I want the characters to feel real, at least like real people. I want it to feel like if we accept the reality of the scene, everything in it makes sense. And this book just wasn't making sense for me. I hope that makes sense. Now I'm going to talk about the top 5 books that I read this year. So at number 5, we have Say Nothing, A True Story of Murder and Mayhem in Northern Ireland by Patrick Radden Keefe. I read this again for my Irish reading blog. I love this book. I thought it was so interesting, so well researched, so well done, about a topic that I don't really know a lot about. So it's basically the story of the IRA, but it's framed around this one event where it was a woman who was a mother of like 10 kids. I'm not going to remember all the specifics, but she was disappeared by the IRA one day. And then this book is written in the aftermath of how they found her body. And it talks about all the players that they believe were involved in her disappearance and other things that they were involved in with the IRA. And it also talks about, like, before this event happens, why the tensions got so bad and like why certain things happened, specifically with this one town, it's Belfast, but with this one community and with this one woman and her family. It also is a lot about like the eeriness of the fact that this didn't happen that long ago. And at the end of the book, you learn about like the relatively normal lives that a lot of these people had. Obviously, there's like tons of trauma involved, but like the book, some of these people didn't die until like the 2010s, right? Some of them might even still be alive. I don't know. But I know like one of the main people died in the late 2000s, early 2010s, somewhere in there. And like, that's fascinating to me just because it really is that close. So I really enjoyed this book. Again, I didn't know a lot about the IRA going into it, but I feel like I've learned a lot, and I still haven't watched the Hulu adaptation, but I would like to. So there's that. Number 4 best book that I read this year so far is The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava. And this is set in Oklahoma City. It's about an Indigenous woman trying to get a job, and she feels like because she marks that she's Indigenous, she's not getting as many interviews, right? So she decides to mark that she's white on this job application, and she gets an interview, and she's going to the interview. And while she's like going to the interview, she meets this guy, and it turns out he works at the company, okay? And he's Indigenous as well, but she doesn't want people at the company knowing that she's Indigenous because she thinks that if they think they know she's Indigenous, then she won't get the job and she won't be respected as much. So it's like exploring that dynamic, but also there's other things on her resume that she's lying about. So she's in school at community college to become an accountant, right? So she's trying to get an associate's degree. She lies and says she has a bachelor's degree in accounting, okay? So that's how she gets this job. And it's just about how all her little lies pile up. So that's like her conflict. But then also she likes this guy, but she feels like they can't date because there's an anti-fraternization clause or whatever. And she doesn't want to lose her job. She and him have all this tension and like how that relationship is going to resolve. I love this book. I thought it was really great. It was very like heartwarming, but also like it's not a story that I've heard before. Like I don't read a lot of Indigenous romances, I guess. So I would like to read more, I suppose, or like modern Indigenous romances. It's just not something that like is a part of my daily life. So I was really glad that I read this one. And I just thought it was so like quirky and funny. And the main character also has like a best friend who is like a ride or die, will cover for her for anything. So like she has to list references for this job application, and her best friend is all 3 of the references, but she's pretending to be different businesses that this girl has done the books for. And it's not all lies, right? Like she's worked at this bowling alley and she like manages the till for that. And like, sorry, I had an alarm go off and I don't know exactly what I was talking about, but it was really cute. It was really fun. She just embellishes her jobs to sound like they were more than they are. And it's just cute. It was cute. It was fun. I loved it. The 3rd best book I've read so far this year is By Any Other Name by Jodi Picoult. I absolutely love this book. I did talk about this in my St. Martin reading vlog that I did because I listened to this on the plane on the way out there. And this is about, so it's 2 timelines, but it's essentially like the premise is this woman in the present day timeline, Melina, is a playwright. And she has been doing this research on Shakespeare. And there's all these theories going around that Shakespeare actually didn't write the majority of his plays, if any, that he was really an actor and a businessman. And so people who couldn't get plays published would give them to him and he would produce the plays. And there's some theories that it was like different people. Like some people theorize that he actually did write some of his plays and these were just like supplemental plays because he did have like an incredibly long list of plays that he wrote or that are attributed to him. But this woman, Melina, finds out that she thinks one of her female descendants, which is actually one of the first female poets ever published, she thinks that her female descendant wrote some of the plays. I don't remember. I know Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet are 2 that she thinks that she wrote or co-wrote or helped with based on this descendant's life. So we're partially getting Melina writing a play about this woman's life and her supplementing Shakespeare's work and like their work together and all of this stuff. And then we're also getting her ancestors' perspective. I just love this book. So I really liked both perspectives. I felt like there wasn't a perspective that I liked more than the other one, which I talked about in my wrap up because I feel like usually when you have 2 perspectives, for me, I'm always like waiting for it to come back around to one, but I loved both of them. They both have like very interesting lives going for them. So we're learning the whole story that is the basis of this play in the flashback scenes or in the past timeline perspective. And then in the present day perspective, Melina is like struggling with being a playwright because she had this one play when she was in college that got tanked by a critic. And ever since then, she's been like very unsure about her abilities. And she has this roommate that she's known since college, who's this Black gay playwright. And he convinces her to use a male synonym. So she goes by Mel instead of Melina and enter into this contest, right? So again, it's like the by any other name with that part as well. So life imitates art. But she does this, but then she gets so nervous because the critic who tanked her play in college is actually one of the guys who's going to judge this competition. So she puts her friend, who is this gay Black man, forward and tells like everyone that he is Mel. He's the one who wrote this play. And so he's having to pretend to be her. And it's just about like their conflict, I guess, is about how sure, like women have it hard in the playwriting industry, but so do like Black men, so do gay people, like all these like different opportunities that she has on the base because she is white, that he doesn't have. And then also the fact that he's having to put his career and his writing on the back burner to pretend to be her so that she can have this like moment of acclaim. So that's something that they have to work through in their relationship. And there's also like a little bit of a romantic subplot going on. It is very good. I love this book. It makes me want to read more Jodi Picoult because it's only the second Jodi Picoult I've ever read. The first one was My Sister's Keeper, and that destroyed me when I was like 10. So I loved it. I want to read more Jodi Picoult. She's got such a huge backlist, and this book was incredible. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it yet. The second best book that I read this year so far is A Lady's Guide to Scandal by Sophie Irwin. I love this book. So I really loved, in December, I read the first book in the series, which I'm not going to remember, A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting, I think is what it was called. These are Regency romances. They're not super strict on the Regency stuff, which is fine for me. If that's going to bother you, I don't think you'll like these, but it doesn't bother me. The premise is this woman who she had this love match when she was much younger, but he wasn't titled and he didn't own any land, and so he wasn't going to be a good match for her family. So she ends up marrying someone who's a distant relative of his who is titled, okay? And now her husband has died and the title has been passed on to her original love match, okay? So that's like the basic setup. But she was in this marriage where she like wasn't in love with this guy. They didn't end up having any kids, and now she can kind of do whatever she wants because she's kind of a wealthy widow. But she has a clause in her inheritance contract thing that's called a morality clause. So if she causes scandal to fall on the family, she will lose her money and her station and everything that she has that allows her to do whatever she wants, basically. So she can do whatever she wants as long as she doesn't break the morality clause. So not really whatever she wants. But she decides to go to Bath for part of her mourning period because she's like, if I have to be in mourning, because there's a certain time that she has to like stay in mourning. She's like, if I have to stay in mourning for this period of time, I'm fine with that. I can do that. I just don't want to be around this family who doesn't really seem to like me that much, essentially. So she goes off to Bath. Her original love match ends up going to Bath as well. And he is like very clearly trying to pursue her again. But there's this other guy whose name I think his name is Max, but don't quote me on that. And he is of Indian, like British Indian descent. And so Scandalo, number one. And number two is he's like very clearly like labeled as a rake in society. So he's wealthy, but he's not really like the type of person that she should be spending time with. And he is kind of pursuing her. And she also wants to pursue portraiture because she loved painting. And he is going to give her the opportunity because he wants to like fund her doing this portraiture stuff. So he has her do a portrait of him. And she's like, well, you can't tell anyone that it's me because I have this morality clause and that won't go well. And he agrees to it. And so it's a sort of like love triangle between the different like love interests, but also there's like more drama with the morality clause happening. I loved this book. I thought it was so fun. I was like really invested the whole time in each of the connections until I was no longer invested in one. But like it just really worked for me. I thought it was really fun. I love the series by Sophie Irwin. I don't know if there's more out, but if there are, I will probably get to them this year. They're just like not super spicy. Like there's not really a lot going on page, but there's just like these deep emotional connections between the characters, which I really like, alongside the like levity of like the humor. I think they're great. I love them. And then the number one book that I've read so far this year is Definitely Better Now by Ava Robinson. This book it's kind of sad girl lit fic, but not really. Like it's more upbeat than that, I would say. It's like a contemporary book about a girl, or a woman, I guess. She's like 26 and she is just ending her first year of sobriety because she was an alcoholic. And her dad is also an alcoholic, and then she's like trying to like regroup her relationship with her dad. Her mom is like moving on from like the mom her mom has a romantic partner that she's like moving on in life with. And also, once you like hit a year of sobriety, I didn't know this before reading this book, but apparently they recommend if you are going into sobriety and single that you don't date for your first year because it can really throw you off the wagon. So and they also recommend if you are in a relationship to not break up, to stay together because it will throw you off the wagon. So she is ending this first year of sobriety, and there's this guy that works with her who's kind of like flirting with her, but she like hasn't told anyone that she's an alcoholic. And because she's kind of embarrassed about it. Like she doesn't want to get into it. And now she's like coming to grips with the fact that she's like probably gonna have to like get into that with somebody and be very vulnerable with somebody. And she's not sure that she wants to, but she does really like this guy. But she's also lying about things. Like why she's not drinking, why she doesn't do certain things, because she doesn't want to be like, I'm an alcoholic. So there's that. And then also she's like redeveloping a relationship with her dad, who is also an alcoholic. And the reasons that he's like reaching out to her again become clear as it goes on. I don't want to spoil them for you, but she's trying to like deal with that and then deal with this like relationship with this guy. But it's all very much about like her being in her 20s, trying to be a working professional, trying to deal with alcoholism and addiction, and like open up her life to others. And also like her mom is leaving their childhood home to move in with this guy that she's been dating, and she's like losing that aspect of herself too. It's very good. It was super emotional, super like compelling writing. I loved the main character in this book. Like I mean, I'm not an alcoholic or anything, but like I related to her a lot, and just I thought everything that she went through was like so realistic and so funny, while also being like deeply touching and emotional. And I love this book. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it yet. I think it came out last year, like late last year, but I'm so glad that I finally read that one. And it's gonna be hard to knock that from my number one book of the year, I think. But that's it. Those are my favorite books that I've read so far this year, and my least favorite books that I've read so far this year, as well as my quarterly wrap-up stats. Let me know in the comments down below what the best book and the worst book that you read in the first quarter of the year were. Also, let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video, how you felt about them. Like this video if you liked it. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content from me, you can subscribe to my channel. I do try to post 2 videos every week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!